Welcome to the Trailbreaker Podcast. I'm Aaron Feinberg. In this podcast, I explore what it takes to be a trailbreaker. Through intimate conversations with people carving new paths across the landscapes of business, art, and sport, we dig in on how to excel across seemingly disparate endeavors. What drives people who manage to succeed multidimensionally? Is it how they think? Is it meticulous planning and follow-through? Or is it some measure of delusional optimism? My guest today is Jeff Moran, Chief Marketing Officer for the Jackson Hole Ski and Snowboard Club, and commonly referred to as the voice of Jackson Hole. When he's not helping the next generation of elite snow sport athletes, you can find him calling the shots for events ranging from competitions on Redbull TV to local pig wrestling. We talked about how he moved past his fear of public speaking, why he never says no to a challenge, and the superpowers of conversational agility and social fluency. Good afternoon, Jeff, and thank you so much for joining the show today.
Hey, what's up, Aaron? Thanks for having me on your Trailbreaker podcast. Stoked to be a part of it.
Well, look, you're a guy I've known for literally half my life, from our time at the University of Vermont to living in Jackson Hole, and you are still there. And I'm excited to talk to you about how you went from being a bartender at Nick Wilson's at the bottom of the Jackson Hole ski area to announcing internationally televised competitions on Redbull TV.
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a wild ride. Kind of started with never even really planning to move to Jackson. I didn't know where this place was. I thought Jackson Hole was in Montana or something. After college, I had a friend who was moving out here with a bunch of other friends. I decided I'd drive him out and stay for a week or two. That turned into an entire season. I literally got down to the last $300 in my pocket. I decided I could either pay for fuel and snacks to get back to the East Coast and move into my parents' house again, or I could figure out a place to live. And like within a matter of a few days, I ended up with a job bartending at Nick Wilson's. I ended up with a girlfriend and I ended up with a place to stay. So I gave all my money to the landlord and started from scratch. And yeah, here we are 20 some odd years later.
I think that story, especially for those of us who lived in Jackson in the late 90s, is not that uncommon. My first spot in Jackson was in a tent in the backyard of a friend's house and serving breakfast to people at Snow King Resort. So look, I know that, a lot of the work you do now is emceeing, is commentating for these big events, is leading story slams for the community in Jackson, but you had a major fear of public speaking back in college. So how do you go from that to what you're doing now?
The short answer is accidentally. In college, I believe in not having any regrets, but honestly, like my college career was essentially decided by when I could go snowboarding around my classes and which classes had oral presentations, because if they had one in the syllabus and I had started the class, I would drop it. And then I would find another class that didn't have an oral presentation. Because I was so just scared, I could not get in front of people. I had a really bad experience in my freshman year trying to give an oral presentation, and it just like shook me to my core. And so I ended up with a degree in sociology, which I've never used, and whatever, at least it's paid off now. But yeah, cut to years later, I was in Jackson, and I ended up being able to work for a company back in Burlington, Vermont. They still exist. They're called Fuse Marketing. And so they work with all these brands and they create these activations and summer-long tours that go along with different events. So like the Dew Tour or the Warp Tour. And I was working on the Warp Tour one summer. I was the manager of the activation or the whole tour. And at the very last minute, the guy that we had hired to be our MC for the whole tour, like last minute, meaning we're getting in the bus and we're leaving in 2 days. And he calls and says he's not coming. And it was the only position on our team that required some sort of skill. There had been a local kid in Burlington, Vermont, who had been beating down our door. And he's like, I want to work for you guys. I want to get on this tour. Just give me, I'll do anything. And we were literally left without a choice. So we hired him and we're like, you have to be the MC. If you've never done public speaking, you literally have to learn this on the fly. And so over the course of that summer, he did a great job, but it was long days. It was a Slim Jim promotion, which was really funny, but yeah, so we were at almost every Warp Tour that summer. and really long days. And so to give him breaks, I would just grab the mic and, have fun with the crowd and play around and do things to get people engaged with our activation. And after that summer, I mean, there was no pressure. I wasn't hired to be that person. So it was really easy for me to sort of do whatever I wanted and have a good time with it. And after that summer, Fuse had another tour where the same dude who had bailed on our tour, he was supposed to be the MC for another one. And so they asked me if I wanted to do that. And I didn't really have any obligations or didn't need to be back in Jackson. So I kind of jumped on this train and started working for Fuse Marketing for a bunch of different tours that they would put together. And, it didn't really matter what the brand was that we were promoting. It was like Mountain Dew or Right Guard or Hawk clothing or whatever. But it was all kind of the similar formula where they'd have some kind of tour and this was the sponsor booth. Or even sometimes I'd announce like skate contests or whatever. Yeah. And I just sort of I learned as I went and got more comfortable with speaking in front of people. And I gave myself this rule that I wasn't going to turn anything down. I was kind of really proud of myself that I'd come from essentially designing my college major around not speaking in front of people. And now I'm like, well, I'm getting paid for this and being flown around the country to do it. And so I think, over the years, I've just made a point of not saying no when I get asked to do something, and it's kind of led me to where I'm at.
And anyone who knows you personally, or I think even sees you live in these events, can watch the agility, the flexibility, the dynamicism that you bring when you communicate. So, go back to those times in your college days. Is there something different about the formality of that, the presentation in front of classmates versus that sort of ability to riff that makes it easier for you? Or is it just, the reps that you had in the commitment to just doing it and getting better, or something else?
I think it was sort of a matter of coming into my own. I feel like, the term late bloomer, I guess I've used that before. Like, I don't feel like I was comfortable in my skin. And so after college and I'd moved to Jackson, I'd been here for years. I was getting really embedded in the snowboard community here and like really feeling like in my place. In my tribe and had found my community. And so personally, I was gaining a lot of confidence and feeling really good about what I was doing. And I was kind of living the skid dream. I worked at night and got to snowboard every day. And for a while there, I had some sponsors who were sending me stuff. And it was just, I just sort of eased into it. I eased into the announcing and emceeing role as I became more comfortable with who I was and I built my confidence. And then I consciously realized that, there's this really, a lot of people early on would say, oh, you have this really conversational style of announcing or emceeing in an event. And what I started to pick up on is if I'd go to an event and they had an MC or someone was announcing something, like you as a spectator, I realized you really pick up on when someone's awkward, when they say something that's awkward and they can't sell it. And so I made an effort to just like be myself and not, and realize that I'm not always going to say the right thing. As long as I'm not offending someone, if I'm not getting like the trick right or saying, the perfect line every time, that was fine because everybody could connect with that. And if I owned the fact that I said the wrong thing or messed up and like just moved on, like it made me more human and easy for people to connect with me. And I found that kept working and working. And so I mixed that confidence and sort of that conversational style with a lot of research. So every time, I was working for brand X or client Y, I put in, to this day, I put in a ton of time ahead of the event to make sure I know everything about the company. I know everything about, what it is they're asking me to speak to. And so when I get up there, like maybe sometimes I'll have notes, but a lot of the time it's just sort of a security blanket in my hand. Like the reality is I've done so much research that by the time I get to the mic, I know what I'm talking about and I can, honestly and thoughtfully speak to whatever it is that I'm there to speak about. And that makes it really comfortable for me. Even though like I'll put in all these hours leading up and I'm like, man, do I really need to do this? But once I get there, it's like, all right, now we're just partying, we're having fun. And I can see, there's this, like when you're doing a live event, there's this instant reaction that you get from people, right? Like they either enjoyed what you just had to say, or they didn't care, or they, maybe on the other end of the spectrum thought it was absolutely ridiculous. But either way, like you can just go with that, how to proceed. And so it's just been years of taking all of these little pieces of how to be in front of people and learning, like, what is it that gets people excited?
Yeah, I think that anybody who's really good at doing what you do is prepared. I don't think you get a pass. I mean, you can be naturally socially fluent and conversationally agile and really emotionally intelligent, but if you don't have the prep down, then that sort of automaticity, that flow, that fluidity, it just doesn't happen. And I think that's awesome. So, you talked a little bit about, kind of coming into your skin and sort of late blooming, et cetera. Did that ability to sort of sink back in or sink into yourself and kind of grow your confidence and know who you were, did that translate into the work you did with kids at the Jackson Hole Ski and Snowboard Club? Because you had a big role, or still have a big role, in terms of developing these young skiers and snowboarders that come out of Jackson. And I imagine, you get them when they're in these, pretty impressionable places. And I think to have, the ability to mold and shape and also model, what, being a man, being an athlete, being a business person, I imagine, that rubs off on them in some way.
Yeah. My time and my different roles at the Jackson Hole Ski and Snowboard Club, I've been there for, I think, going on 18 years now. And my time there, and my time at the club aligns pretty much identically with how long I've been doing, announcing and emceeing. And it's worked really well together from a logistical standpoint. It works really well because a lot of the events that I announce are either put on by the club or they're similar to what the club is involved with, like kids ski and snowboard events, skateboard events, a lot of that stuff that I've done. But as both of my roles were developing, so I started at the club as a snowboard coach, moved to head snowboard coach, and then ultimately for about a decade, I was the director of our freeride program, and now I'm the chief marketing officer. But all along the lines, or all along that path, especially when I was working with kids, so I would go off and announce an event, or be announced for a sponsor at an event, like say the Dew Tour or X Games or something like that. And so being involved with that event, or the events like that, kept me like really connected and really embedded in the ski and snowboard world and industry. And then I would bring that back to the club, and not only was I able to keep up on like who everybody was, what the new tricks are, but I would then take that, and I mean, there was some clout that I guess I brought back is in the kids' eyes, because I had just gone to the Dew Tour. They didn't know that I wasn't actually like the Todd Richards or the Solomon Mesekela, like calling the shots. But like for them, they had this coach who went to the events, but I was also learning, like, hey, did you see so-and-so's runs at the X Games? I got to watch that in person. And then, vice versa, when I was coaching, right, like my role was to engage these kids and to make sure that what I'm saying to them is succinct and concise and not being too wordy, right? Like I could sit there and talk to a kid all day about how to, learn a new movement or learn a new trick, but talking to him isn't going to do it. So I use that opportunity to figure out how to be, a little bit more poignant and choose my words wisely, so I could get my point across to them. And so that skill then translated back to being on a microphone and, realizing that, okay, I have this point I need to get across from, whoever it is I'm working for, and don't jumble it, like be sharp, be direct, and have fun with it.
Amazing. So I basically learned that if you want both audiences and teenagers to pay attention to you, be interesting and get there quick.
Totally. Yes, exactly. Make fun of yourself too. Definitely be self-deprecating, because that works in both worlds. So the other thing that I know you've been up to is creating story slams within the town of Jackson. And, I believe they're part of the library. Is that right? Yeah, Yep, that's correct. Teton County Library. So there's a woman I work with, Leah Schlachter, and she got in touch with me about, I guess it was in January 2014 was our first one. And she was creating this new event. I mean, I know they had been done. It was kind of modeled off of the Moth series, and said, hey, I want to do this. She had got my name through a mutual friend and asked me if I had any interest. And I'd never even heard of the Moth, which if you're not familiar with the Moth, it's like a storytelling podcast series. I'd never heard of it. So I kind of had to do some research. But again, that goes back to the, I never turn anything down. Like, okay, this is an opportunity for me to just learn something new, learn a new skill, and push myself outside of my comfort zone. And yeah, so since 2014, we've had, I think in the high 30s, we have our first in-person Story Slam coming up in July, on July 19th. It'll be our first one back in person in a while because of COVID. We were doing them online. But essentially, that's where I get to just be myself. The way the format is I host this event. It's all crowd participation. So we say, okay, this event's theme is, X, Y, or Z. The one coming up is skills, for example. And people can just show up and watch, or people show up and put their name in a bucket and we pull their names randomly. And then they get to tell a story, and you never know what you're going to get, and some stories are just like off the charts, exciting and funny, or maybe really sad. Some people are really good at telling stories. Some people, maybe need a little more practice. But like either way, it's just this totally, like myself and everybody at that event, we're all experiencing it for the first time as it happens. But the thing with the Story Slam is, I didn't know this, but like I think it was like the night before, 2 nights before the first event, Leah texted me. She said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, it's traditional for the host to break the ice with their own story." And so then I was like, just instantly sweating bullets. I was like, okay, normally I'm sort of the middleman, right? Like I'm not like the entertainment. I'm just sort of facilitating, making sure, the audience knows about the action that's happening, or the audience knows how to engage with what we're doing. But all of a sudden that changed everything. Cause I now had to, even for only like 5 minutes, I had to be the entertainment and the focus of that. And that really scared me. It pushed me outside of my boundaries, like much further than I thought it would. But now it's been awesome. Like at every single one of these slams, for 38 Story Slams over the course of, 6 or 7 years now, I've had to come up with my own personal story that it relates to the theme to break the ice. And so that's this awesome challenge that every time I'm like, okay, here's the new theme. And I'm just like going through the Rolodex. And I mean, the Rolodex is actually a really, really long list in my phone of all the things that have ever happened to me. And I'm just like scrolling through like, oh, right, that'll fit the theme. But that event is where I really get to just be myself, have fun. I'm just bringing people up, maybe making some comments on their story, cracking jokes, having fun. But it's like, I'm so proud of that event. Leah and I feel like have built like something really, we went from it being in a pretty small little restaurant, Pinky G's Pizzeria here in Jackson. The first one, pretty much blew the place out. We moved to a slightly bigger space. And then, when we were last doing them live, we were filling a 300 plus person theater at the Pink Garter. So yeah, that's sort of how I guess I can keep my chops, but how we do one a month throughout the winter, and I get to just stay on top of what it's like to engage with people.
Yeah, I bet that Jeff Moran story vault is deep and dark.
Some are darker than others. Yeah, there's a few in there where, like a theme will pop up and I'll say to my fiance, Amy, I'm like, ooh, this one, what do you think? That could fit the theme. She's like, absolutely not. Never. You can't tell that until we leave Jackson. I'm like, okay, well, that might not ever be told then.
Yeah, Amy is a good woman to have around for you.
Absolutely.
And yes, there was a time where I was driving back to Jackson for a summertime visit, and I got word of this whole Story Slam, and I had the same feeling. I was like, I do this for a living, and I need to go and tell a story in Jackson. And I came and did one, and I was surprisingly nervous that those last 4 hours driving from Salt Lake up there, I was thinking about what I would tell and how I would tell it and would it land and how risky I wanted to go. So
yeah, I was so stoked that you threw your name in the hat and told a story. I mean, that's awesome. And right. Like you are in front of people talking all the time, but it's just this different, it's just this different dynamic. And it's fun to see, like, we have people that come every single event, and no matter what, they put their name in the bucket and they're like, I'm going to tell a story, and they don't really practice. And then you have the people who sort of build up the courage to, put their name in the bucket, and they don't really want their name to be picked, but they sort of do, so it's the full spectrum of people, like people that really get off on being in front of a crowd, and people who are like, just like, I got to do this. Even if it's only once in my life, I have to break through that fear and just get up and tell a story.
I want to eventually get to, what it takes to go from all these amazing experiences that you've been doing in Jackson to then bumping it up to the international level. But before we go there, I'm curious, Jackson, like a lot of mountain towns or resort towns, et cetera, there's a lot of distractions, from the activities to the social scene to the travel and the off seasons. So like, what does it take to stay focused enough to actually move your life and your career and your skill set, in these new upper directions, while also, remaining connected to the town and to have a life that is worth living while being there?
Yeah. I think, for me, it's definitely a balance. I feel really fortunate because, there's these events that I've done recently, like Natural Selection and Kings and Queens, which are on obviously a much grander scale, but I do a ton of events around town. I mean, just this past weekend, I was the announcer for the Touch a Truck event, like a fundraiser for the Jackson Hole Children's Museum. And so I try to do everything, and for me, it doesn't matter what the event is, but I always look at it like, okay, whether it's, on the grandest scale or just like a small community event, or not so small community event, that allows me to constantly be involved. And that essentially is my involvement. Like that's, there was a point where I found myself, and, this is a little bit pre-COVID, but I found myself getting to go to all the events that I wanted to be at. And I was getting paid to be there as the MC, and so I'm having fun. I'm getting to be a part of the event I would have attended anyways. And then what I started to realize is, on a regular basis, people started saying, like, you announce everything. I see you at everything. And it's like, oh, like what are, it's sort of the light bulb went off, and I'm like, that is my marketing. Every time I do an event, I'm literally like in front of people marketing myself for potentially another event. And so it's gotten to the point where I've had to, over the course of the years, like I have to make decisions about, how many events can I do? Like what's comfortable to fit into my schedule. I don't want to get burnt out on it. Like it's this really awesome side hustle, I guess you call it, that I'm passionate about, and that it challenges me, it pushes me out of my comfort zone. And I don't want it to get to a point where, it feels like a job, right? Like, I think I mentioned earlier, it fits timing wise really well with my career. I'm kind of a 9-to-5er, and a lot of the events I do are either in the evenings or on the weekends. And so those complement each other really well. And as long as I'm, staying conscious of not burning myself out on it, and also, really being honest with myself about my worth and my value. And that, I think that's a really hard thing. You're kind of reevaluating it every year. Like, okay, just because I've done X number of events, or, an event with, so-and-so's sponsor name on it, like, how does that affect my value? Does that bring any value to the next event? They may not care that, I was involved with Natural Selection. So, yeah, it's a constant balance. And as far as like being involved with the rest of Jackson, there's that saying, you got to make hay when the sun shines. And for me, another thing is, I'm fortunate that a lot of these events line up in the winter. And so in the winter, I'm crazy busy, but I normally would be anyways, working for the Ski and Snowboard Club. And so I'm just, a lot of communication with Amy, a lot of communication with the executive director, Allie, at the Ski and Snowboard Club, and just making sure, like, okay, if I do this, is that going to negatively impact, our relationship or our professional relationship? Because the last thing, those two things definitely come before me. Like, I'm not just out there like, you guys pick up the pieces. I'm going to go off and do my own thing. So I think communication and being honest with myself about, is this something I want to do? Is it going to help me move that ball forward? And am I going to enjoy it? If I'm not going to enjoy it, then I'm not going to do it.
Yeah. You're talking about, being purposeful in designing your life and then being reflective enough to sort of think about whether a redesign is necessary and whether, all the important parts, relationships and, satisfaction and bringing in the abundance is, is happening the way you want it, which I think is awesome. And I think, it is really important for people to, as they grow, to continue to ask ask for what they've earned, right? Not what they deserve, but what they've earned. And I think that, those are reckoning type of conversations that we have with ourselves and understanding that, you ultimately do set your bar for your value and what you believe you're worth. And obviously you have to deliver, but it's important that it's not, it's not being greedy. It's not being selfish, if you are earning it and you're delivering at a high bar. And I think that's super awesome to see, everybody who's, started off, back in the late 90s in Jackson, it was just a little town of 6,000 people. And then who has just, climbed the ranks in all these different areas. So, what was required of you, if anything, to then bump it up to this next level, or whether you had just built the skills and those opportunities arose and then you were ready for them, or did you have to up your game even more?
You mean in order to be involved with like natural selection and kings and queens, that sort of thing?
Absolutely.
I didn't, to be honest, I didn't really have to do anything in order to, like, I didn't have to apply or throw my name in the hat. Honestly, those events came along the same way that all the other events do. I do a lot of events. So people recognize that I'm, people call me like, oh, you're the voice of Jackson Hole. I that's not my thing, but people say that. And they say, I do enough events where I'm regularly seen and I don't have any one type of event, right? Like, so I do ski and snowboard events, skateboard events, gala fundraisers, competitive beer drinking contests. I mean, like, it's like all over the map. And it's essentially like, if you need someone to speak on a microphone or talk about what's going on, I can do that. So when it comes to like kings and queens, I do a lot of work. I'm really involved with Jackson Hole Mountain Resort, both professionally through the ski and snowboard club, but also from an announcer's perspective. Like I've done many other events for them. I annually announce their Dick's Ditch Bank Slalom. And so, the first year I did Kings and Queens was 2 winters ago. And so when they needed someone, they decided they wanted sort of, a recognizable face, who's involved with a lot of the Redbull events, which is DC, a good friend of mine. And then they wanted someone local who kind of knew, the local athletes, knew about the local culture, about the mountain. And so, I don't know what their decision-making was, but I think it seemed like probably a pretty good fit, because they already knew that I could speak to the mountain in that way, and that I knew all of the people. So that's kind of how I got involved with Kings and Queens. With natural selection, I think, having already been involved with Kings and Queens, I was on the Redbull radar. I was on JHMR's radar as far as having been involved with a really high level event like that, broadcast event. And then I just, I'm friends with Travis Rice, and he's seen me do quite a few events. And I mean, he's told me personally that he likes my personality and the way that I do events. And so that was really like, he made the call to have me involved. And I was really fortunate to just, I felt really honored to be selected. Another part of that too, with natural selection is, our good friend, Melissa Larson, who unfortunately passed away a little over a year ago. Melissa, was really involved with the planning and design of all the natural selection, or of the natural selection series, as it was going from essentially Travis's brainchild to an actuality. And so Melissa, being one of my closest and dearest friends, I think she kind of put the bug in Travis's ear too. And then, I guess it's all who you know, right? Like all of the events I'd done and all the people I knew got me to that stage.
Yeah. And I mean, I think as you were mentioning, you wind up knowing more people when you put yourself out there, when you say yes to things, when you just continually evolve. And that's awesome. So on that theme, anything that's in your pipeline, that we wouldn't know about, whether it's another big event on the international stage or even something maybe a little tangential?
There's nothing that big right now. Like I was saying, the summer tends to be a little mellower. I did just have that fundraiser a couple of days ago. We've got a couple story slams coming up. All this stuff is pretty local, community events in Jackson. One really fun event that I get to do is for the Teton County Fair, their annual figure 8 races. So this is the event very well. It's like one of the best nights of the summer in Jackson Hole. And for, I'd say about 17 or 18 years, I was in the stands, yelling and screaming and betting on which car was going to win next. And then I, fortunately, again, through knowing people and having done quite a few events, other events and getting my name out there. I got the tap I actually was doing a few events for the county fair. I did pig wrestling. I did the Ninja Warrior event. So like all these really fun, really different events that sort of, keep it exciting. It's not the same cookie cutter formula every time. And so I get to do the figure 8 races. And then after that, I guess we'll see what happens next winter. I love to be involved with Kings and Queens and natural selection event. And, I feel like I held my own. I got some good feedback on being involved with those events. So hopefully, the powers that be want to have me back and I'm in if they want me to.
I think you're shooing, especially, given your background with the pig wrestling. And I mean, when are you going to announce the rodeo?
The rodeo, people have asked me that, man, the rodeo and the snowmobile hill climb, talk about getting outside of my comfort zone. Those would be really fun to do, but man, would I have to do some crazy research. I mean, those are that'd be like asking someone who knows nothing about snowboarding to be one of the commentators on natural selection, right? Like I didn't grow up rodeo. That's a lifestyle, snowmobiling. That's a lifestyle, right? Like I'm not embedded in those communities. So maybe like if I got the tap on the shoulder to do those, I'm not going to turn them down, but man, would I have some studying to do.
Well, look, I know you have successfully transitioned some hobbies. You still snowboard, but now you drive around in your big monster white adventure van. You've got some dirt bike camping habit now.
Yeah.
Rodeo and snowmobiles is not out of the question, Jeff. You are truly a trail breaker, and this might just be where you're headed. So look, I really appreciate you spending some time on the show with me. It's fantastic to hear what you've been up to for the last 23 and a half years I've known you. So all the best. Have a great summer, and looking forward to hearing your voice next winter.
Awesome. Thanks, Aaron. Really honored to be on your podcast. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care.
Cheers.